So once again, welcome everyone to a very exciting webinar at iTelescope. My name is Christian Sasser. I'm the astronomer in charge for iTelescope. And today it's all about Dr. Massimo Tarenghi, who is the builder of the world's largest optical telescope. And he's also a very accomplished scientist, astronomer, and photographer. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Dr. Massimo Tarenghi. So please come in. And there you are. Very good. Can't hear you. Yeah, there you are.
Good, whatever it is, afternoon, morning, night. I can see that the people attending this meeting, they have always sun somewhere. So we are in a group of people where the sun is not setting down.
Very good.
I'm very pleased.
Yeah, and tell us where you are at the moment, Massimo.
After 44 years working in Chile, now I'm in Munich. Munich is where the ESO has its headquarters, also where I have my grandchildren. And last 2 years with the COVID situation, I have decided to stay next to my daughters. They can help me in case. Thanks to God, in case it never happened, and I hope it will not happen. And so I am eager now to go back, not only to Chile, but many other countries where I've seen mentioned in the list of participants.
And by the way, I would also like to very much thank Sikandar, who's also here at the moment. Sikandar, thank you for putting us into contact with Massimo. So that's a great initiative. So, and anyway, shall I share my screen? So I will do the I will do the screen sharing from here, and you just tell me to go forwards and to backwards and to stop when you want to run a poll. He's got some Massimo's got some great polls too for you. So shall we start?
Maybe before I would like to say a few things about myself and my life. I was an amateur astronomer when I was 17, and already a journalist came to interview me in my town of Monza for the local newspaper, asking, now that you are going to have a driver license, what do you like to have, a Ferrari or a new telescope? And I say, I want to have a new, bigger telescope. And there was a big title of the newspaper. This idiot, they prefer to have a bigger telescope than a Ferrari.
Good.
Today, I will change my mind, but that is another story. But already at that time, I decided that I want to be an astronomer, professional astronomer, but I want to have a fortune to work in the biggest observatory in the world, because the second is the first of the last. I work hard with big luck. At the end, I managed to work in the biggest observatory in the world, because I have the fortune to build the two biggest observatories in the world. So that is a little bit of background of so I abandoned for a while my career as an observing astronomer and scientist, pure scientist, and I became responsible for construction of big observatory, big telescope. And I will tell you a little bit more, what are the things that we have done. Some time ago, my brother gave me a small book published exactly the year where I was born, in 7 years ago. And it was what we know about astronomy today. And when I read this book, I said, astronomy, it was so different when I was born. And today, it's totally different thing. But my presentation starts from even when I was not born. So we can start.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Under the beautiful sky of Chile, I will tell you a little bit of history of the VLT, the Very Large Telescope, and other telescopes that we have been building in the last 50 years to observe better the sky. Next.
1 second, I have to get used to this. Oh, sorry, that's too fast. There we are. Okay.
The reason why I want to transmit this beautiful story is to go back more than 100 years and look what it was the dream of astronomy in that time. It was to look for life in the universe. And there was a big fight or competition or collaboration, as usual in science, between Lowell and Schiaparelli, one in Arizona and one in Italy, Milan, about the construction of the channel on the Mars. I had to have a great admiration for these people that with such a telescope in not an easy place, they were observing this structure that we know are not done by human being. But it was giving this kind of attention. Where is life beside our Earth? So this story continued in the year 1900. Next slide. We show to you, next, a telescope was built in 1900. It was the same time when in Paris was built the Eiffel Tower for this beautiful exhibition. This was looking a moon to try to see if there is life on the moon. So already at the time, there was this passion about looking life on the solar system. We still have this one with looking for possible life on Mars. We know the moon is not the case. But this shows the first big question for astronomy. Do we have life in the rest of the universe? Well, then in next slide. In 1915, a genius, Einstein, wrote this beautiful equation, very simple, that describes completed the universe. Now, it's very peculiar to look this complex or easy equation that is as difficult to understand like Mona Lisa. You know that when you go around the Mona Lisa paint, it seems that she looked to you always. And the same equation, it looked to you always with new discovery. And particularly this lambda with the mark, it was introduced by Einstein to be a situation to have a stable universe. Without that thing, universe was not going to be stable. At that time, the universe known was our Milky Way. There was nothing else than the Milky Way. And so this guy, genius, introduced this constant. But then a few years later, he said that it was a big mistake because it's not physically correct. Now, we know now that it's more than physically correct. It's a revolution into knowledge of the universe. Then we're going to have another step. 10 years later, when next slide, Hubble discovered two things that are marvelous in their simplicity. First is the nebula M31. It was not part of the Milky Way. It was more than 2 million year light away. So the universe that Einstein described in 1915, it was bigger than just the Milky Way. But even more complicated with the beautiful 100-inch telescope of Wilson, he discovered that every time he was looking for a fainter galaxy and more distance, they were going to go faster and faster away. So this universe, the Einstein thought that was static. It was not static. And this became a very important question. We need to go deeper anyway. It was to build something bigger than the 100-inch telescope. And that started the big game of a huge, big telescope. And they started always with a dream, as a typical in the big science. Next slide. In 1924, in France, they thought that in order to explore the universe, the idea was to build an 8-meter telescope. Now, unfortunately, the cost of this 8-meter telescope was a little bit too high at that time. It was true also that the cost, when you look at the budget was prepared by this manager to do this telescope, it was composed by two prices. One, it was a cost of a telescope as a construction, and one, a cost for the engineer in charge of the manager in charge of construction. And these two numbers were equal. Unfortunately, this rule was not used later because at that one, if it would be used, I would be now a very rich man because they pay much less than the cost of a big telescope observatory we have been building. But it was already the idea to build an 8-meter telescope in 1924. But it was a problem. How can you build a mirror of this size with the technology of that time? Well, next slide shows a solution. It was in Bologna that Horn-Venturo, the director of the observatory in Bologna, he thought to use a segmented mirror, take a small hexagonal mirror and build a bigger primary mirror. And he did one, and it's in Bologna. This guy, he was a genius. Unfortunately, it was not understood. Many times happen in the world, a genius is never understood. He did two things very interesting. The segmented mirror is also the interferometry, taking two mirrors and combining a larger distance and combine the light. This was too early. It was not the time yet for the use of this one. We know now that this, starting with the K, is a way to go bigger and bigger. Well, but there was a solution to all this thing. And this occurred at the end of the Second War. Next slide. With the construction of a fabulous telescope, the Palomar 5-meter, 1949. This work is a masterpiece. I have to say that I always, when I was in charge of building different new telescope or new observatory, I took my engineer to Palomar and I invite everybody to visit Paranal today, still. Because when you go in, next slide, and you see the dimension and the complexity of this telescope and the beauty of the technical solution introduced at that time, starting with the hydrostatic bearing and all these other things, you see that we had a jump in technology that it was necessary to really go bigger. Well, but there was a problem. If you have to go bigger, this will imply cost and dimension in the equatorial mount that are prohibitive. And so there was one solution, to use azimuth mount. And that was done for the first time with big scale by the Russian astronomer. Next slide. In 1975, they built an azimuth telescope for 6 meters. That was bigger than the 5-meter Palomar. So there was a big fight. Who has the biggest telescope in the world? I was there in 1976, and I was fascinated by this construction because it was simple. It was not working very well, but it was a a very interesting way to go farther, and particularly to use computer for controlling the telescope. And this, it was a big step. When I went to see the BTA and they showed to me the computer running this telescope full of valve and lamp and all this kind of thing, I think that a Macintosh now is more powerful than this 4-room computer running this telescope. But this is not important. The important is to consider the use of computer in running telescope. Well, but there was a problem. If you want to go bigger, you must have two things that neither Palomar, not this BTA have. First, to be in a place with no light pollution. Next slide. And certain United States, and California, Europe has been very good in this context. You remember that the best plates obtained in Florida, in California, of the sky were obtained when during the war, all the light of town had been shut down and the sky was dark. So we had to find new place where to put telescope to avoid light contamination. And these two places are found, or three places, are found in Canary Island, in Hawaii. But if you look on the left, Hawaii is already a little bit contaminated, or South America, Chile. But you have to find with no light pollution, but also another thing, does not have a cloud. So next slide show the number of places, this covers 3 years of cloudiness, where there is little or no clouds. And you can see that the best place are Chile, Namibia, Egypt, and so on, Australia. Now, there is one problem. You need also to be high in elevation for reason turbulence and so on. Australia is good in terms of no cloud, but it's not, there are no mountains. Namibia is okay, but not very high. And the best place is Chile. Next. And so Chile, in this extension of 4,000 kilometers, the Chilean, I'm now also a Chilean passport, say, we think that is more than double than 4,000 kilometers because we have also Antarctica to the pole, southern pole. But let's say we stay in the part known as Chile. And in the north of Chile, there is Atacama Desert, where you've seen in the previous slide, no cloud. Next. The Atacama Desert is the driest desert in the world. A perfect for astronomy. There is no light pollution, really. There is no water, there is no tree, there are no animals, there are no insects. It's a beautiful place for astronomy, ideal place, but it's horrible for life. You do not like to live there because there is nothing. And we'll see later how nothing means. And these have been the two places that have been taken after year and year of analysis to put the best optical telescope observatory and the best radio observatory, the middle of the desert of Atacama. Next slide. Okay, here is so I people work for 44 years ISO, in using the desert Atacama. Like Tololo, we used at the beginning, the American, and also Las Campanas, we used the south of desert Atacama, with the excuse that we go to the south, so we had to go as south as possible to observe the southern sky. The reason is that the desert Atacama in the south, there is water, there is easy connection, and nobody is so eager to go in the middle where there is nobody, and nothing. And we build there, and then when we have to do a next step, we decide to go in the north. And I will tell you later more about the VLT. And then when we decide to go also in the radio millimeter wave, we went even northern, higher, and I will tell you later. So these are the places where I will show you in my presentation, where I've been building the telescope step by step to reach the situation we have today and what will happen tomorrow. Next. This is a beautiful sky of Chile. Well, the picture you will see is part of my program of astrophotography. And now, after building and using the biggest telescope in the world, I use the smallest but best camera with the best lens, commercially available for professional use. And I also do courses of astrophotography. These have been all obtained with Nikon. Typical exposure of photo like this one is 25 seconds, and this is how you see the Milky Way in the southern sky, practically every night. Next. Now, ISO started the game in Chile a few years after Tololo with a 3.6 meter telescope. This was a Palomar type. It was clear that when we finished this in '77, and I was the first one or second one to sit on the prime focus for 11 hours to take pictures of beautiful sky, it was clear that we had to do something different to go further in the telescope technology, dimension, and quality. Next slide show the difference we have done. Same mirror, the 3.6 classic one Palomar type in the left, and the new type, NTT, where we put, let's say, the Russian system at azimuthal, thinner mirror, and smaller dome. And all this as a consequence that we were able to build for a third of the price, a telescope that was of the same primary mirror, 3.6 meters. And this, it changed completely the way to do telescope in the world, because we introduced something even more revolutionary, the active optic. Next slide. Now you can see the two domes. I have to say that it's not fair, the comparison in terms of scale, because a different distance from a photographic camera. So the entity, it will fit easily in half of the big tower of the 3.6. You understand already from this point of view that the cost is reduced. It's just a matter of amount of steel, glass, and other things that compose a telescope. Next. But the biggest revolution was the introduction of the active optics. That was done on NTT, but we did the NTT to be sure to be able to do the VLT. It was impossible to build an 8-meter mirror in the classical type, and we had to go reduce the thickness. By that moment, you had to also control the shape in real time. So the system worked in such a way that every half a minute We control the quality of the image and focal plane, and we control actuator on the primary, and we recenter and refocus the secondary continuously. So the mirror is always perfect. This is a very interesting thing, because when I was young and I was working with a new telescope, for example, I was in charge of building the 2.2 meter last year. The telescope was perfect when we adjust with optical team everything. But then 1 week later, due to deformation or gravity and so on, the telescope was not as good as the first night. So the first night I was able, for example, to observe the Saturn ring with a magnification 2,200 times. It was unbelievable. But then it was not possible after. But with this active optic, every night, every minute, the telescope was in the perfect condition. And this had been changed, and now everybody had to build new system with this active optic. Next one. And then we also built a dome. There was no conventional. I remember journalists came to, they say to me, "Oh, it's very ugly. How can you do something so bad with this one?" Well, I say, "Sir, this we work during the night. It's dark, you don't see it, but work very well." Because this system, besides to reduce the cost, because it's co-rotating, also give impression to the telescope to be in open air and give something that was not understood before. The best quality is when the mirror surface is in a status where you have 1 meter per second airflow, removing any heat. And so this possibility to control the speed of the wind with these louvers and flaps and so on and windscreen, it was fundamental for the quality obtained in NTT that now will transform and implement also VLT. Next slide. Now, the first night, my trade colleague, Wilson, the guy invented active optic on LSST, and I was in Munich on the remote control. And the first observation we did, we had an image with a seeing of 0.33 a second. When I was younger and not with active optic, and I had 1 second of arc seeing, I was opening a bottle of champagne. Here we had 3 times better the seeing. You can see here the double star separate 0.79 a second. This changed completely our way to use telescope, because we discovered that on the ground, the quality of the air, if you control air and thermal situation in the telescope, could be much better than was foreseen. This has a consequence to have to redesign all the VLT instruments. And next slide, even my friend, American journalist, they say the NTT, the best telescope yet, sharpest image from the NTT. It was recognized that that was a step. But for us, it was only a step toward the VLT. We had to demonstrate this, to have the money to build the VLT, the $1,000 million given by government to embark in the VLT project. And with this success, we have been very active and they've been very generous to give us the money. Next. Of course, when they give you a lot of money, you have a lot of work to do. First of all, you have to select the best place. And we, after many years of exploration of the seeing condition, we selected the mountain of Paranal. Next slide. This is My first photo of Paranal in 1987 was this Paranal peak. It is a beautiful mountain at 12 kilometers from Pacific. When you are on the top, you seem to be on the plain. Pacific normally covered by clouds, but the mountain has a quality that the clouds, maybe you see 4 or 5 times a year, maybe 6. And when you see a cloud, you always go out and take a picture because it's beautiful. It's different than the normal condition. But you can see that this peak is beautiful, but not to have a platform for 100 from 200-meter diameter with 4 big telescopes. So the first thing we have to do is to cut this peak and flat and remove 400,000 cubic meter rocks with explosive slowly, not to destroy the rocks where to build your solid telescope. So next slide show the sequence of events. A picture in 1991. Then in 94, we finished to cut the top of the mountain. And then 99, we had all the thing. I can tell you from this 8 year, the quantity of work we have done on that mountain was impressive. We reached a moment that we had more than 700 people working in this desert where there is nothing, no water, no light, no animal, and oxygen is limited, and the humidity, it can be easily, happened to me 1 week, we had humidity inferior to 3% for an entire week. It's tough, really tough. Well, next slide show a moment of construction when the first dome was almost done, the second in preparation, the third started dome, the fourth was only foundation, and then also the tunnel for interferometry, the control room, the amount of material. Now let's understand this 250-meter diameter populated by 700 people. It was like a Egyptian construction of the pyramids. But everything went very well, smoothly, and we had our 4 telescope, big one and 4 small, built. Next. And so this is what is a day with a lot of clouds. And in addition to build the observatory on the top of this mountain, we had to build also all the infrastructure. It means we had to build a town to be independent from the closest town, the Antofagasta, under 80 kilometers away. You have to understand that this is one of the most dangerous places for earthquake. We had several earthquakes, couple over the years, 9 to 7. The biggest we experimented was 8.5. We expect 1 or 10. We build everything to resist to be 10, and also we have infrastructure that will let people living there for 2 weeks in case of big earthquake that will destroy probably Antofagasta, and they were not going to come to save us before they solved other problems. So it is the infrastructure are as complicated. When I decide to go to, well, we decide to go to, these are the site, to go to Paranal. I remember my friend of Gemini projects say, Massimo, good luck. We'll see your funeral on the desert of Atacama. You will never survive there. They were right, but they forgot that we have not built on the observatory. We built a town in the driest desert. We bring water every day from under 80 kilometers. We bring fuel to produce our own electricity. Now we have a connection with the local electricity line, but we have to do 20-kilometer connection. So we have done something more than just observatory. Next. Just to give you a photo that I did from commercial plane. I've not used a helicopter, just a commercial plane. Paranal, you can see the observatory, you see down there the camp with all the infrastructure, and then you see a mountain, Yaco, is a border with Argentina, under 90 kilometers away, and there's no pollution. When you are on Paranal, you can see the glacier on under 90 kilometers away, as it will be next to you. You will see also on the left one mountain that we will show you later where we're going to put the next telescope. But we will come later on this thing. So this is really the driest desert. And when you take a picture from the ground, like the next one. Okay, this is Paranal as appeared when you walk in the desert. Now, if you take this photo, and we do Photoshop, to change the photo color of the sky in black, and you compare to the NASA photo of Mars, there is no difference. Nothing. It's the same. And that is what we did to build in the most hostile place in the world, the most complex. I remember when the photographer in '87 went there and asked him to take picture with a big Linov camera of the desert, the place. He said, "Are you crazy? I'm not going to take my Linov camera in a place like that. I will destroy my photographic camera." Now, the problem is, in this desert, there is no dust because the desert is so old and covered by a little crust. There are more dust inside the dome than outside because inside the dome, you have humans that are bringing dust. So it's totally different. It's unique and beautiful if you survive in this place. Next. Next slide. Okay, this is what we have been building. 4 telescope. Okay, this is one with 4 telescope with the primary mirror 8.2, 4 small one, 1.8 part of interferometry. And this is 4 machine equal in terms of telescope. The different the focal plane instrument. Next one. Okay, now I will have maybe one day a conference only to an 8.2 meter primary mirror. When we embark in this project, nobody ever built 8.2 meter. We had to place a contract with Schott and Reynolds for the casting of the primary mirror and then the optical figure. Let me tell you that just to give you a little bit of complexity, they had to build 2 factories, one in Mainz, Germany, one in Paris, to build the glass and the second polish the glass. For the glass, to have pure material, you have to have 60 tons of glass that is in contact only with platinum. So the pipe, the spoon for a month of turning is platinum. We had to buy, we had to have in the industry 7 tons of platinum. Now, if you buy that one, the price of platinum, it will go bananas. And when you sell, you lose a quantity of money, impossible. So what with Schott we decided to do is not to buy, to rent for 3 months, 3 years, sorry, the platinum. So we pay the cost of renting platinum, and so our contract was have a change of cost depending on this factor. This is one of the many things we had to solve to do this, and also very simple. Next one. The first casting, here you can see, when we put 40 tons in a mold, and then in 3 hours, we went from 1,400 degree to 700, covering with this system and removing quickly heat in order to bring below 800 degree. And then it took 6 months to go to room temperature. Unfortunately, after 2 months, the glass broken in many pieces. So we lost the first. And then the second also broken. So we lost the second. Meantime, we had a telescope, but we had no mirror. So they had to work a solution. More than 120 engineers worked for months to find a solution. And finally they found. And then we had 6, because we had 4 for us and 2 spare, ready for, and this took a lot of time. And this was interesting situation because we had mirror, telescope, but no mirror. Okay, because when you have glass of 40 ton room temperature, you have to remove 50% of the glass. So you remain with 20 tons. And then you put in the furnace in the back of this picture for 9 months. At the magic temperature, they cannot be changing more than 1 plus or minus 1 degree to transform this in glass ceramic that does not feel the difference in temperature when it is operating. And so that was about 2 years production per mirror. But then it was only a piece of glass, or glass ceramic. So we had to take this one to Paris and polish. Next slide. So here you can see the machine, the polish in Paris, our 4 mirror, and also the 2 Gemini. And this, it took 2 years to polish each one, with accuracy of surface of 4 nanometers. And when it was finished, we had to take from Paris to Chile. So we had to go through the Seine River, go to the open sea, next slide, and put on this beautiful ship and send through the Paranal to Chile. We arrived, we put on the track, and we start the journey of 180 kilometers to the observatory. Next slide. Well, it was a beautiful track going at 3 kilometers per hour. It took 4 days to go. And we walked it through along the thing to be sure that everything was horizontal. When we arrived at this point, we knew that there was no road for the last 80 kilometers. There was only desert. So we had to have a system to flat the desert for this transport. Next one. So we had Gradle that created a flat road in front of a transport. Next. And you can see that we have done also 80 kilometers of road in the desert. Now the government of Chile, through an agreement with us, paved this road. So it's a beautiful thing. And finally, the primary mirror arrived at number 1, next one. After a few turns, it's beautiful to see also on the desert you must do some turn, because here we were in an area with a very steep slope, and we had to do a zigzag in order to pass this little thing. And then you see the continuation of the road in the desert. Next slide. Okay. And I arrived. Now I stop a moment, and in fast sequence, I show you a few photos of Paranal in the night. Next one. Oh, sorry. This is when Paranal was completed with the 4 big telescopes and the 4 small ones. Next. This gives you an idea of one instrument in the focal plane of the VLT. We have 3 focal planes always active. So we have 12 instruments permanently ready to be operated for the need of astronomers. Next. Now, this is a secondary mirror. And I have a question for you guys. I will show you the beautiful glass ceramic of the primary mirror of VLT. Now, you know that now today everybody is talking about the James Webb Space Telescope. Do you know the material of the primary mirror of the James Webb Space Telescope? I help you. It could be gold, beryllium, or glass. Do you know which?
Yeah, I'm running the poll, Massimo. Okay, so I'm running it, so we'll see.
Okay, good. Now, let me tell you that this mirror that I'm sure they cannot answer.
They are answering for sure. I'll tell you in a moment. Hang on, we'll give them a few more seconds and we'll have the answer.
Good. Now, what I'm showing you here is a secondary mirror of the VLT telescope, telescope. Now, here I have a very interesting story to tell about the diameter of this primary and secondary mirror. This is 1.2 meters. Now, when I was young at the university, I used my first, well, good.
Yes, it's good. It's
but
good.
There are too many people that they have been triggered by my question, because the answer is in beryllium, but it's covered by gold, but it's not gold. It's only the coating, instead to be aluminum, is gold, because of infrared use of a telescope. But good. Now, this secondary mirror, as I say, was a diameter 1.2 meters. That there was the first telescope I used professionally in Asiago, a 1.2 meter in primary mirror. And this was one time the biggest telescope in the world. Oh, sorry, in Europe. Okay. Now we use that as a secondary mirror for a VLT. And now this one, you had to be built in a special way. And we use beryllium because we need to reduce the weight. That's a great feeling. If I will build this one in glass, it will be of order 300 kilos. This one in beryllium is 35 kilos. And this is exactly the same technology they use by a segment of the James Webb Space Telescope. Next slide. You see, this is a James Webb Space Telescope. And the secondary mirror of the VLT is also in the back, is done by the same technology. So we open with the VLT the road for the James Webb. When we built the beryllium in the 90s, 1.2 meter, the biggest piece produced in beryllium was the door of space shuttle, but it was not the same high technology of this era. Well, next one. And here I like to introduce these two beautiful space telescopes. One is a 2.4 and the 6.5. There was a big discussion. Why we continue to build a ground-based telescope when we have such a beautiful telescope in the space? So when I finished the first VLT, it was a time when Hubble Space Telescope produced a first big, deep photo of the sky. 21-hour exposure time. I was provocative, and they said, wow, let's do the same photo with the VLT. And I see the difference between a VLT and Hubble Space Telescope. And here you can see in the next photo, the two compare. At the left, you have 15.2 hours of the VLT, and the right, you have 22.5 hours of the Space Telescope. It's clearly better, sharper, but all the objects you can see with the Space Telescope, you can see also with the VLT. And what is a consequence of this one? That you can do spectroscopy because you can receive more light with a bigger telescope. At that moment, it was clear. There was no competition between space telescope and optical ground-based telescope. When I say optical, because infrared is not another story. As a matter of fact, James Webb Space Telescope is infrared because it is obvious that with ground-based of 8.2, we can do better than James Webb Space Telescope. Next one. Here is, I like to show this picture. I took from my friend Alberto, another astrophotographer, who work together. You can see here, you see the constellation of Orion with the three-line star on the left. Now, this picture I took, and you can see the big shadow of a tripod and Alberto. It was at midnight. I've not used a big flash. I use a full moon. But still with the full moon, you can see very well the sky. This shows the beauty of the sky on Paranal. Let me show the next slide. This we took when a full moon, you can see above Alberto the Milky Way. Of course, it's not as good as you can photograph it when there is no full moon, like in the next slide. That is a totally different. And this shows the beauty of this sky. Let me go through some of the photo. I can see that we're short on time. Next slide. You go faster. Yeah, here is another photo you can see. Here, sorry, stop a moment. Here you can see in 25 seconds, if you look at the original photo, 5 shooting stars in 5 seconds. It's impressive. When you are there, you are bombarded by fragments of comets coming through the atmosphere. Next. Here it seems that the auxiliary telescope is burning. Next. Now, this shows Milky Way, but also a laser cannon that we have installed to create artificial star on the sky using a cloud of sodium at 75 kilometer altitude from the observatory. We shoot this laser, we focus on this cloud, we eat the sodium, and we can have a very bright star. We use for adaptive optics to modify the shape of a small mirror 400 times per second to compensate the turbulence of the atmosphere. So we transform the VLT in a space telescope, removing in real time the atmosphere. Next slide. Here is a picture I took from inside when you see the cannon shooting this laser beam. And let me show you, next slide, the comparison between a space telescope picture to the left and the adaptive optic to the right. So this is a difference between 2.5 meters in the space and 8 meters in the ground. And this shows once more that ground-based telescope can compete with space at the cost that is 1/10 of the cost of the project, or even less. Next one. Before to continue with the telescope, let me show you what we did, because we have not only built, as I say, telescope, we have been building a new way to live in the desert. And we built this residence that has been famous because James Bond have used this building for one of the movies. It is a beautiful idea coming from original idea I had with the Director General of ESO to build something in the driest desert of the world with a swimming pool inside. And this architect, our engraver, invented this building that is unique in its feature. Next slide, show the building outside. What happened? One. Go back. One. No.
1 second.
Okay. Fine. We. I don't know what happened to this thing. Okay. So you have seen now everything. And go inside. You see that we have garden underground. We have also a swimming pool. Now, some of the people say that, Massimo, you are totally crazy to build a swimming pool in the desert when there is no water. In reality, this is regenerated water. But there's also, next slide, there's also a function extremely important. We control the evaporation of this water in such a way that inside the building, there is a decent humidity, in spite that outside we are below 5%. So when you come in, you seem to have go in a sauna. The humidity is only 25%. But it's very important for the life of people that are operating there. Next slide. Okay, let me go quickly. There are two things you can do from the ground: optical telescope and radio telescope, and particularly the one in the millimeter, sub-millimeter way. And we decide to, with American and Japanese, to build the biggest observatory in millimeter, sub-millimeter wavelength. But you have to go high. Next slide. You have to go in the north of the Atacama. Next slide. You have to go for about 400 kilometers from Paranal. Next. And arrive to a beautiful town called San Pedro Atacama. All the mountains you can see there are above 6,000 meters. Next slide. This is, sorry, this is not as good as the original. Next one. Here you have a beautiful salt lake, second biggest in the world, Atacama, with beautiful flamingo. Next. Next. And you have some hotels are gorgeous that have been designed to protect the beauty of the sky. You can see a picture we took in this hotel that is designed to promote the beauty of the southern sky. Next slide. This is from the same hotel. They have a small observatory, and this is from the small observatory what you see the Milky Way. This is in San Pedro Atacama. Next. And here in San Pedro, we have this the OSF camp where we have installation, like a Paranal hotel. We have also hotel design and architect, and then the telescope at 5,000 meter altitude. Next slide. This was another fascinating project that I had the pleasure to conduct for the first 6 years of life as a first director. And this combined technology and human crazy life when you put something so complicated at 5,000 meters where there is half oxygen that you have on the ground. Next. Of course, we control everything remotely, like the space station, from the 2,000 meters, because nobody's allowed to be during the night at 5,000 meters. Next. As a matter of fact, we had to be checked from medical point of view before to go 5,000 meters. It's very dangerous. If you don't take care and you are not in physical condition good enough, you risk something. Next. First of all, you are not able to think straight. I refuse to answer different questions when I have 5,000 meters. Sometimes also when I have a lower altitude, but that is another story. So we had to build a road of 5 kilometers for go to 3,000 to 4,000 meters with a center slope to transport up and down the telescope of 140 tons. Next slide. We arrived at the place, no, next. We arrived at a place at 3,000 meters where you seem to be in Arizona with the cactus, but then they stop, or even this cactus and higher. Next slide. When you reach the 5,000 meters, the maximum you can have some snow, but nothing else. There's nothing. Next. Next slide. Well, we have been building 66 antenna. This plateau, they're observing every day and night the sky and looking for molecules in the universe. We can see the complete distribution of the water in the interior universe. Even more complicated molecules. Formation of exoplanet and so on and so forth. Next slide. We can reposition the 66 antenna like a zoom from 300 meter diameter to 14 kilometers. We can go deep and observe detail of interesting source. And everything is done remotely. Next slide. Okay, now there's a few questions. The first question, in which country there is the largest number of large telescopes operating? Easy, no?
Well, it's filling up quickly. We'll just wait a few more seconds and then we'll launch the results.
Wow, very good, very good. Wow. Okay, but the second question in this contest, I say, which one is the largest telescope in the world today? Optical telescope, sorry, because here I don't want to have confusion.
So you're saying optical telescope, that's important.
Optical telescope.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tricky question, but
There's someone saying we need the Jeopardy music. I agree. Quiz show.
okay, here is the GTC is correct. There is a very close competition with LBT. CAC is far away. If you look at this photo, you can see the yellow is GTC. Okay, let's close. And the LBT are the two with the circle in between is equivalent. Okay. Now, if you want to be very serious, but I've not used this thing, the biggest is a VLT when we compose the light of all four telescopes in one. And we can do that. So I decide not to put as the answer the VLT, but in reality, the biggest telescope is the VLT. But let's continue to. Here I have this representation of the size of all the telescopes we've been building for astronomy. The little pink circle in the up left is this great Paris exhibition telescope, the one I've shown to you, that deserves to be mentioned as a bigger optical telescope. The three on the left are the big telescope we are in the process to construct and complete. And then there is one that is like a donut, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope. And I want to finish with just showing these four telescopes because they show the future of astronomy. Next. This is the largest digital camera in the world. It's 3,200 megapixel. And it's been named as very Rubin telescope. And I'm very happy because she was a fantastic astronomer. Not only astronomer as a person, was a marvelous person. And it's really good that she has a first name of a telescope associated to her because she was the one that discovered the dark light, dark matter. Okay, and this is this telescope is going to change completely the way to see the universe. I like to compare to this telescope to the telescope that Galileo used 420 years ago. with a small telescope of 3 centimeters, he was able to see the sky that it was not fixed. There was changing object, changing position. The Venus was shaped. The Jupiter has something going around, and he discovered that the universe, contrary to Aristotle's theory, was not a fixed thing. Now this one, we discovered there is nothing fixed. He observed every 3 days into the sky for 10 years, and we showed that everything changed in position, in luminosity, in color, whatever it is. If we find something that it doesn't change, it will be a big revolution. So this is going to be really fantastic telescope. Next one is a giant Magellan telescope that is using the technology of the MMT with combining 8.3 meter telescope mirror. Next one. So is a son of the LBT. Next one. There's a beautiful thing that we done in Chile, Las Campanas, and this one is the 30 meter that we all hope that will be built in Hawaii after the the difficulty that we have been encountered with the local community. It seems now close to be solved, and I think that it will go Hawaii instead as other alternative to Spain. But is another project, is a son of the Keck telescope, and is a son of Jerry Nelson, that was a father of the Keck telescope. Unfortunately, will not be able to see this second grandson. And then ESO is now involved in the construction of the E-ELT. Next one. Oh, sorry, this is Keck. You can see the segmented mirror. This technology discovered in 1932, that before the 2032 will be operational also for the 30 meter, and of course also to the E-ELT. Next slide. So that is what the E-ELT will be, sitting on the Amazon mountain, 20 kilometers from Paranal. So it's part of Paranal Observatory. It's only one addition telescope on Paranal Observatory. Next slide. And this we expect to complete in 2027. COVID, of course, have been delayed a little bit, this project, but this now is a year that we expect to complete this. This will have 4 or 8 laser beam, and it's a big investment that Europe is doing, as well the American Keck and GMT are doing for improving the astronomy. Next slide. We had to select the best mountain in the world for the biggest observatory. We found there was 20 kilometers from Paranal. I have to say that we knew that it was the best mountain already in the 90s. But we have changed Paranal because it was less wind, because we didn't know yet the effect of the wind of the telescope. With the NTT, we discovered how to control the wind. And now we have been lucky to have the best mountain in the world for the best telescope and the biggest telescope in the world. Next slide show that we have been already cutting this mountain. Next slide will be better in showing the thing. Here you can see the base camp where there are the construction team is operating at 2,000 meters instead of working at 3,100 meters where the observatory will be constructed. Next slide. Okay, I see good quality. Next slide. Okay, you can see that it's not only idea, there's already construction going on. It's very complicated. It's more than 100 meter in diameter, more than 100 meter high construction. So it is a tough project. Next. You can see now they start to build the foundation for the dome. Next. Here is also a very revolutionary design with 5 mirrors. One of the mirror is also the one that will do a chopping, and one of the big mirror is going to be the form 400 times per second for the adaptive optics. So it's working always with adaptive optics, and it's very powerful. Next slide. Show a thing seen from the entrance, but in order to have a feeling of the dimension of this construction, you have to go to the next slide. When you see, sorry, this is a laser. No, the next one. You see this telescope compared to big construction. And this, and also compared to the VLT, you see the dimension we are involved. Now, why are we doing this? What are we looking for? Well, I answer it with a few slides and then I finished. Next one. We have to go to a sharpness and a depth in the universe that can be only achieved with big diameter of mirror. And you see here to the left a 1 arc-second image of the sky with the space telescope. Then with the VLT meter with the adaptive optic, and then with the same 1 arc-second. You see the advantage and the revolution in how deep you can see faint thing and sharp. So with this telescope, we expect to go further in the discovery of the life in exoplanets, because we will be able to see, thanks to this sharpness, the exoplanet separate from the star. Of course, we have to cover, like an eclipse, the light of the star. And we have to do like has been done with the space probe. Next one. You know, we know that since some time, the existence of exoplanets, something turning around, and we know that exist exoplanets that are at the distance of a star that has a possibility to have life because the temperature is good. Now, I have a question here, the last one. And this is, in which observatory was the first exoplanet discovered?
Yeah, we'll wait a few seconds.
Yeah. Now you see the difference in luminosity between the star and the planet. We failed here. It was Haute-Provence Observatory that discovered the first exoplanet. Major, that received a Nobel Prize for this discovery. Okay, you don't need a big telescope to observe the existence of exoplanets, but you need a big telescope to observe separate from the light of the star, the exoplanet. And let me show you the difficulty for this observation. Next slide. Here is Saturn that eclipses the sun. And the little point in the circle is the Earth. This was obtained picture from Cassini mission. Now, when we be able to see an exoplanet in this way, even if very faint, we can integrate and look the spectrum of the atmosphere, because the light goes to the atmosphere and we reveal the existence of life. We can maybe one day also do meteorology on this exoplanet. But this is one of the big things that we expect to do with the E-ELT. One of the reasons why the government give us the money. The other big thing, they want to observe the interior universe. Next slide. So we want to be able, with this capacity to detect faint objects at big distance, thanks to also the sharpness we can look, to go close to the dark age and see the beginning of the visible universe, see the shape, quality, nature of the first star, the first galaxy creating our universe, and be able to explore the complete universe. And so, maybe, new thing about the nature of two things that next slide are clearly showing existence. We have, when I was a student at university, it was not in the time of the dinosaurs, we thought the universe was composed by star, neutrino, some hydrogen, helium spread. And now we have discovered that this part is nothing compared dark matter, dark energy. And we have nothing. So about the nature of these two. So university time today, we discovered 96% of ignorance. But the ignorance is ignorance when you don't know there's something that you have to understand. And what we're doing now with this telescope, American, European, is to try to understand what we have not understood so far. Thank you.